This video was sent to me by Carl Reason towards the end of last year, after which I completely forgot about it. Sorry. Trying to tidy up my folders, I came across it again and thought, what the heck, but be warned, this is going to be long. I called for help/clarification, and one of my friends was kind enough to give his input to the whole video. His input is designated JC.
When we think of our sun, we tend to picture this great self-consuming nuclear furnace that will one day fizzle out when there is no more hydrogen left to sustain the fusion reaction. But what if this model is wrong? What if the entire premise, and indeed the whole cosmological model itself, is based upon a faulty foundation, that of gravity being the principal driving force behind the universe?
Well, you'd need to find a new mechanism for the energy production in stars. Current thinking is that the sun is powered by a process called thermonuclear fusion. This was not accepted lightly. When Eddington proposed it in 1920, many astronomers didn't accept it, perhaps even most, given that the equations for what temperature would be required to fuse nuclei together was far higher than that predicted at the solar core. But when quantum mechanics came into account, this issue disappeared. From JC, claims that the sun does not produce its energy through fusion have to deal with one really pesky problem: we detect neutrinos coming from the sun. These are particles that are only emitted by certain types of nuclear reactions, and the spectrum of neutrinos received is perfectly consistent with what you'd expect from proton-proton fusion, with a small additional amount coming from the CNO cycle, after allowing for the existence of neutrino oscillations. And the number of neutrinos detected matches within about 1 or 2% to the flux expected of all the sun's energy, some 3.8 times 10 to the 26 watts, was coming from the fusion of hydrogen atoms in its core. This video by Shrunken Simon does not answer this question of what powers the sun, and amazingly goes as far as saying that he doesn't have to.
Unlike the standard model, the EU theory does not attempt to answer those questions with hypothetical answers based more on imagination than fact. It simply states that the power expressed at the sun is coming in through electrical channels, that it need not be generated at the sun itself.
However, this still leaves the question of by what mechanism this occurs.
We've all seen the sun's corona during an eclipse. This is a region of plasma extending more than 1 million kilometres from the surface of the sun and reaches temperatures in excess of 2 million degrees. But there is a problem here. The surface of the sun itself only reaches 5,000 degrees. How can the heat from the inner core heat the atmosphere to millions of degrees, yet only heat the surface to thousands of degrees?
It doesn't. The solar corona is a bit of a mystery, but current thinking is erring towards magnetic field activity causing the rise in temperature. It's probably no coincidence that the number density of electrons also drops rapidly in the transition between the chromosphere and the corona. But little direct energy is delivered from the core to the corona, and I don't think that any astrophysicist would suggest otherwise.
Another anomaly is sunspots. These are regions where we can see furthest into the sun's interior, and thus, according to the standard model, should be hotter than the surrounding surface region, given that the sun is hottest on the inside. But in reality, sunspots behave in opposite manner. They are actually cooler than the surrounding region. In order to explain this blatant anomaly, astrophysicists have come up with a warped explanation involving twisted magnetic fields and the solar dynamo, neither of which are proven, let alone having actually been observed.
This fails to comprehend the mechanism behind sunspots. Sunspots are caused by localized magnetic fields that block convection currents and stop them from delivering hot material to the surface. Hence the regions become cooler than the surrounding area. These are generally accepted to be delivered from deeper within the sun, and SOHO and SDO data has been used to image a sunspot emerging from the interior to the surface. The sun's magnetic field has been measured by spacecraft, and sunspots are just a natural consequence of differential rotation, which causes a chaotic magnetic field. Because the rate of rotation of the solar surface depends on latitude, the magnetic field lines are dragged at different rates. From JC, the strength of the magnetic field on the surface isn't hypothetical speculation as the video suggests, but can be directly measured, for example, by measuring the Zeeman splitting of spectral lines. We can produce magnetograms which shows the magnetic field strength, such as this.
One of the best pieces of evidence for an electrical universe, in my opinion, is the comet. Last October, Comet Holmes exploded in a brilliant fashion, brightening by nearly 1 million times in only 42 hours, and becoming visible to the naked eye. The comet itself is only 3.5 kilometres in diameter. This fantastic coma of fine dust has since expanded to a diameter greater than that of the Sun. This sensational astronomical event barely even made the news, and the explanation for the outburst is equally as disappointing, that of it being the result of exploding gas from within the comet, despite the fact that Holmes is actually moving away from the Sun, making the sublimation argument very weak.
The standard explanation was proposed by Altenhofer et al. In the paper Why Did Comet 17P/Holmes Burst Out? Nuclear Splitting or Delayed Sublimation. This paper notes a few things. Firstly, that sublimation caused directly by the Sun effectively ceases at around 2.5 AU. It also notes that 17P had made a pass of the Sun with a perihelion of around 2.05 AU, which puts it well within this sublimation range. The fact that 17P was moving away from the Sun is fairly irrelevant to sublimation, which occurs anywhere within 2.5 AU. If a comet makes a pass at 1.5 AU and then heads away from the Sun, it will still be susceptible to sublimation from the Sun all the way until it reaches 2.5 AU. Comet 17P was still just within this region when the outburst occurred at around 2.4 AU. It's true that it is more common to see comets sublimate dramatically nearer to their perihelion, but it doesn't rule out sublimation elsewhere in the orbit, especially if confounding factors are at play. Thirdly, the paper notes that the observation of sublimation may well have been delayed by the surface characteristics of 17P. If the surface, called dust mantle, was well sealed, then no sublimates would have been able to escape and would build up under the dust mantle. In 17P, still heated by the Sun, this subsurface sublimation continued to occur until eventually it ruptured the dust mantle, causing the outburst. Considering the delay is explicable through surface characteristics and that the comet was within the frost line when the outburst began, I fail to see how the standard argument could be considered weak. I also note that no mechanism is put forward to explain this outburst in the video.
In July 2005, NASA crashed its probe called Deep Impact into Comet Tempel 1. This resulted in an immense flash of light, so bright in fact that the sensors recording the event were overwhelmed. NASA failed to predict this energetic outburst, but the plasma cosmology team at the Thunderbolts website did correctly predict this event.
And this prediction was published where? It's no good saying, yeah, we predicted that, without actually telling the wider world. Looking for it, it was a prediction of more energy. Well, that's a 50-50 chance, and it's not quantified, so I fail to see why it should be taken seriously.
In 2000, Comet Linear, brightened by more than 50% in less than 4 hours, threw off large quantities of dust and also began emitting X-rays, a telltale sign of intense electrical activity.
X-rays are also indicative of solar wind interactions with cometary material. So? From JC. X-rays are emitted by many processes that do not involve electricity at all, though industrially they are usually produced that way. These include bremsstrahlung, synchrotron radiation, thermal emission at temperatures in the megakelvin range, and characteristic X-ray emission after a K shell and or L shell in heavy elements electron is removed, for example due to a collision with a gamma ray, high energy photon, or a reverse beta decay process involving K shell electron capture.
Time and again, the so-called experts have been dumbfounded by anomalies and mysterious occurrences with comets. The standard model of a dirty snowball comet is well and truly dead.
Yeah, but no. Seriously.
The electrical model has made many successful predictions regarding comets and thus should be taken seriously by the mainstream cosmologists.
When the predictions are unquantified and vague, I fail to see why. When the Big Bang model was reproposed in detail by Ralph Alpha and George Gamow in 1948, it predicted with numerical estimates the relative abundances of hydrogen and helium. Without some sort of quantification, most so-called predictions with regard to physics are irrelevant.
There are two great examples of where the gravitational cosmological model has falsified itself. The first is with a stellar object known as a pulsar. According to the conventional model, these are highly magnetized rotating neutron stars which emit a beam of electromagnetic radiation in the form of radio waves. The rotation of the pulsar, combined with the beam, produces a pulsing effect, hence its name. But there is a problem with this model. Some pulsars have a pulse rate so high that according to known laws, the pulsar should fly apart under the strain. In order to plug this hole, the mythical neutron star had to be evoked in order to explain how this body could rotate at speeds so fast that under conventional laws should fly apart.
Neutron stars were proposed in 1934 by Bade and Zwicky. Pulsars were not discovered until 1967, more than 3 decades later. Neutron stars are a natural result of the inability of electron degeneracy to support an object mass greater than 1.4 solar masses, and are couched in quantum theory, one of our most successful theories to date. They are very well established theoretically, so calling them mythical is either ignorance or subterfuge. The maximum mass that neutron degeneracy can support is 2.2 solar masses for irrotational neutron stars, or 2.9 solar masses for rotating neutron stars. In section 16.7 of An Introduction to Modern Astrophysics by Caroline Osley, the maximum angular velocity and hence minimum rotational period of a body is determined. The maximum angular velocity may be found by equating centripetal and gravitational accelerations at the equator. The minimum rotation period is p min equals 2 pi over the maximum angular velocity, or for a 1.4 solar mass neutron star, p min is about 0.0005 seconds. This value is equivalent to 0.5 milliseconds, and there is no known pulsar in this range. Pulsars should not fly apart according to conventional laws. The inferred rotational periods are perfectly in accordance with conventional laws.
But the problem is you cannot pack neutrons together as tightly as hypothesized in a neutron star. Laws in nuclear chemistry prevent this.
The most interesting part of this statement is that no such law is quoted. I could just stop here and take this statement for what it is, a baseless assertion, but let's not. Neutron stars form in one of two ways. One, they may form directly in supernova. In the late stages of stellar evolution for massive stars, an electron-degenerate core is formed. When the mass of this core exceeds the Chandrasekhar limit, which is about 1.4 solar masses, it spontaneously collapses, forming a neutron star. 2. A white dwarf may steal matter from a companion star until it exceeds 2.4 solar masses, where it will spontaneously collapse. Either way, both cases are examples of electron degeneracy being unable to support the object anymore. What happens in simple terms is that the electrons are squeezed into protons, forming neutrons, which can support the greater mass. Even neutron degeneracy can only support a certain mass, as quoted earlier, above which they collapse further, forming black holes. Neutrons can be placed very close together. They are limited only to the extent that they obey the Pauli exclusion principle.
So what you have with a pulsar is a completely hypothetical model that is unable to explain the observed evidence without straying into abstract physics and untested supernatural forces.
Pulsars are well established theoretically. The attempted denigration of them reeks of desperation.
The second example is with a stellar object known as a black hole. The first thing to take into account is that no one has actually ever observed a black hole, only the energetic effects surrounding these hypothetical objects.
Again, black holes are well established theoretically. They drop right out of general relativity.
In order to explain the compact energetic activity observed at the centre of galaxies, the black hole was invented using abstract gravitational mathematics. Gravity was chosen as the tool of choice because it was the dominant force of the universe, or so they claimed.
Gravity was chosen because gravity works. Gravity is the dominant force for large amounts of matter. Galaxies tend to be, large amounts of matter, and the mathematics really isn't that abstract. And just what is gravitational mathematics?
There are numerous basic logical problems with these hypothetical objects and clear evidence that astrophysicists have tweaked the model when conflicting observational data was encountered. The jets seen near the black holes are an example of this. They are beams of energized matter travelling at nearly the speed of light away from the black hole. Yet, a black hole supposedly won't even let light escape its grasp, a simple logical contradiction, one that has resulted in another hypothetical object being invented, known as the accretion disk. This was conjured up in order to counter this problem. Again, another untested, unobserved piece of abstract physics created out of thin air. This is how desperate the experts have become to cling on to their gravitational dogma.
The exact mechanism behind the production of jets by quasars and similarly stellar mass black holes is still under debate. The existence of accretion disks follows from the laws of physics, specifically conservation of angular momentum, and as of late 2011 they have been observed in quasars. From JC: no, we can actually see accretion disks. He shows an actual image of one, though this is of the Crab pulsar, taken by the Chandra X-ray telescope, then a minute later claims that they've never been seen. Polar jets are due to infalling matter requiring kinetic energy as they spiral inward and must be ejected at extremely high speed in order to conserve angular momentum. The matter that is ejected in jets is not coming from inside the event horizon, making
Yet, a black hole supposedly won't even let light escape its grasp.
A non sequitur, but come from the accretion disk outside it, where escape is very possible. In section 17.3 of An Introduction to Modern Astrophysics, 3 paragraphs are devoted to comments on stellar mass black hole candidates. You may feel as though much of this section on black holes was borrowed from the pages of a science fiction novel. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and the proof of the mere existence of black holes has been difficult to obtain. The problem lies in detecting an object only a few tens of kilometers across that emits no radiation directly. The best hope of astronomers has been to find a black hole in a close binary system. If the black hole in such a system is able to pull gas from the envelope of the normal companion star, the angular momentum of their orbital motion will cause the disk to form around the black hole. As the gas spirals down towards the event horizon, it is compressed and heated to millions of Kelvin and emits X-rays. Only the gravity of a neutron star or a black hole can produce X-rays in a close binary system, and in fact the compact object in most X-ray binaries is believed to be a neutron star. However, if an X-ray binary can be found in which the mass of the compact object exceeds 3 solar masses, then a strong case can be made that the compact object is a black hole. The first black hole to be tentatively identified in this way was Cygnus X1, near the bright star Eta Cygni in the middle of the Swan's Neck. Another promising candidate is LMC X3, an X-ray binary in the Large Magellanic Cloud. Yet another compelling case involves the X-ray binary A0620-00, also known as V6161. The orbital velocities of both components of A0620-00 have been determined using Doppler-shifted spectral lines. A simple application of Kepler's law shows that the mass of the compact object must be at least 3.82 plus or minus 0.24 solar masses, well above the 3 solar mass upper limit for a neutron star. However, perhaps the strongest candidate is V404 Cygni. Originally determined to be a recurrent nova, V404 Cygni underwent an X-ray outburst in 1989 that was detected by the Ginga satellite. Examination with ground-based optical telescopes revealed a companion star of type K04 with a radial velocity amplitude of 211 plus or minus 4 km per second and an orbital period of 6.473 plus or minus 0.001 days. The best estimate of the mass of the unseen companion to the K04 star is 12 plus or minus 2 solar masses. As more evidence accumulates, it seems that astronomers have finally found the extraordinary proof required for the existence of a black hole.
The next thing I wish to talk about is the redshift controversy. Whilst not directly related to plasma cosmology, it is an important aspect in destroying the so-called expanding universe theory, as well as the Big Bang theory derived from this. Supposedly, redshift can be used to determine the distance of stellar objects from Earth, but an expert astronomer called Houghton Arp discovered numerous galaxies and objects with different redshifts that were connected to each other, thus falsifying the redshift equals distance hypothesis.
He found them because he sought to find them. His methodology was flawed because it was biased. Instead of using a computer program or a well-defined methodology on a large sample, he handpicked from a small sample the objects that supported his conclusion.
One example is galaxy NGC 7603. As you can see, the main galaxy is connected to a smaller formation through an arm of plasma, known as a filament. The problem is that the smaller formation has a much higher redshift value than the main active galaxy. Rather than acknowledge this, the experts put this occurrence down to chance locations in the same section of sky. A research arm of NASA issued a press release in the 1980s claiming that two objects, galaxy NGC 4319 and a quasar called Macarian 205, were not connected by a plasma bridge. They also released a photograph apparently showing no connection. Both these objects have very different redshift values, but it can be shown that they are in fact connected together via plasma filament, thus placing them at the same distance from Earth. Why did they release a misleading image, and also why did they feel compelled to issue a press release? I'll leave you to ponder why.
These two examples are explained by the web article Alternate Approaches in the Redshift Controversy. A link is included in the description. Arp's hypothesis is discussed on the League of Reason forum, which is included for brevity rather than as a grade A impeccable source. This video is already long enough, and there's still more to come.
So far, I've only mentioned aspects of plasma cosmology in space. Now it's time to bring the focus much closer to home. On December 12, 2007, NASA released an article stating that it had discovered magnetic ropes connecting the Sun directly to the Earth, and that these are also responsible for the aurora borealis. The truth is, a man called Christian Birkeland thought of this phenomena himself over a century ago, who coincidentally was born on December 13th. NASA failed to credit Birkeland and also get the terminology correct, Birkeland currents rather than magnetic ropes. Birkeland also recreated many other phenomena seen in space in his laboratory, such as planetary rings and energetic displays of cometary jets.
This whining is irrelevant. Newton is rarely credited for coming up with a particle theory of light, and he is one of the most famous scientists there is. So...
Stop whining!
In any case, the reason that Birkeland currents were not mentioned is likely because they are a well-known part of the story, while the effect of magnetic ropes are not. On top of that, they appear to be subtly different phenomenon.
The conventional theory regarding lightning is that it is produced by turbulent interactions of raindrops within a cloud, which generates a charge. Even as a child, I knew this explanation was blatantly absurd. Not many people know, but the discharge of plasma we see between Earth and cloud is only half the picture, and plasma formations actually occur simultaneously above the cloud as well as below. These upper atmospheric discharges can reach up to 60 miles above the Earth.
Personal incredulity doesn't mean squat. If, as a child, someone has said to me that something can be in many states at once, or behave like a wave or a particle depending on how it's observed, I would have considered it silly too.
It is believed that the Space Shuttle Columbia might have actually been struck by upper atmospheric lightning. NASA denies this and even confiscated pictures from a San Francisco newspaper to silence investigation. Is this yet another example of NASA deliberately suppressing information?
More vague allegations of wrongdoing baselessly lodged against NASA.
Stop whining!
In June of this year, NASA announced that it is close to a breakthrough in their work regarding an early warning earthquake system. It was also reported by the BBC that scientists observed a massive signal in the ionosphere just prior to the earthquake which devastated China on May 12th. A previous study examining more than 100 earthquakes with magnitudes 5 or greater in Taiwan over several decades showed that all of these earthquakes were preceded by distinct electrical disturbances in the ionosphere. It seems clear to me that earthquakes are electrical in some form.
Changes in the Earth's crust that precede earthquakes are thought by some to produce electrical currents. The BBC article says, just such a signal was spotted in the days leading up to the recent devastating event in China. In the days leading up to the event. If electrical activity caused earthquakes, then the signal would have been as good as simultaneously to the earthquake. It wasn't.
One has to wonder if the HARP research program and similar stations, devices capable of putting immense electrical energy into the ionosphere, can possibly trigger earthquakes.
While before, Shrunken Simon's video was merely dipping a foot or a leg into the waters of conspiracy, it now appears to have dived headfirst into a pool of crazy. The causation is upside down here. It's not the electrical activity that causes earthquakes, it's the pre-earthquake stresses that are thought to cause electrical activity.
Biological life would not be possible without electricity, and the role it plays has been greatly underestimated in my opinion. Our cosmological paradigm inherently influences every other scientific discipline, and the disconnected, gravity-driven Newtonian model has surely shielded many aspects of reality from us, least not in the biological sciences. One should also not forget that light is a form of electricity, and when you consider how crucial light is to our ecosystems, the true importance of electricity becomes apparent.
From JC. No. There is a fundamental physical interaction known as the electromagnetic interaction. Electricity is a manifestation of that. So is magnetism, and it is related very closely to electricity through a changing reference frame. Light is another manifestation of the electromagnetic interaction, but there are lots of things which are demonstrably not manifestations of the electromagnetic interaction, gravity and nuclear interactions for example. Light is not a form of electricity.
But by far the greatest implication of electricity in nature is surely its role in consciousness. It is now understood that the Earth's magnetic field is not only detected by certain animals for navigation, but by humans as well, and that it plays a crucial role in our mood and circadian rhythms. The pineal gland in the human brain is very sensitive to magnetic fields, and it is this gland that produces melatonin and regulates our sleep cycle.
There are indeed a limited number of studies into the effect of electric and magnetic fields on the pineal gland. There is, however, a difference between conscious detection and non-conscious effect. The pineal gland is affected by electric and magnetic fields. We do not detect this consciously.
The resonant cavity between ground and ionosphere is excited by lightning strikes and gives rise to the Schumann resonance, first detected by Nikola Tesla. It just so happens that the resonant frequency matches that of the human brainwave state known as alpha, or a relaxed state.
Unfortunately for this claim, it's not true. Schumann resonances, which are resonant frequencies from lightning in the ground ionosphere cavity, extend from 3 to 60 Hz, with notable peaks at 7.86 Hz, which is the fundamental frequency, then 14.3, 20.8, 27.3 and 33.8 Hz. Alpha waves have a range of 8 to 12 Hz, which matches none of these peaks.
There are also correlations between other brainwave states and the resonant frequencies of other cavities, such as the Van Allen belt, the magnetopause, and even the Earth's crystalline inner core.
There are hundreds of resonant frequencies all over the place. Of course, some are going to line up with others. Doesn't imply anything. Note that there's no methodology or sources for the figures listed, and also some resonances are attributed to brain states erroneously. The magnetopause is said to be related to delta brainwaves, even though the figures listed state that the magnetopause resonance is outside of the range for delta waves. And the Earth's crust and mantle is said to be related to alpha waves, even though again the text itself puts this resonance outside of the range of alpha states. But these numbers intrigued me. They look very linear, which is surprising given that the cavities are made of different materials. So I fired up a spreadsheet, and you know what, this is appalling. Okay, for a start, this is the equation for a simple Schumann resonator. So the resonant frequency of the nth mode is given by this equation. When I put in n equals 1 to give the fundamental frequency, I was consistently overshooting. What gives? Trying again, I made a mistake inputting the formula, missing out the square root term. This was actually a bit of serendipity, as now 5 out of the 6 seem to approximately match the quoted figures, and all can conceivably match upon rounding. So let's be blunt, this claimed correlation is based on a faulty calculation which misses out the square root term in the formula for a simple Schumann resonator. Less forgivingly, the formula is used on every object equally as if they were the same, but there is a vast difference between mostly vacuum, as for the magnetopause, and entirely solid, as for the Earth's inner core. You cannot treat the Earth's core the same as an air cavity. Nature does not work that way.
When you realise just how electrically interconnected biological life is with the Earth, and how the Earth is electrically connected with the Sun, the rest of the galaxy, and even the entire universe, you can begin to appreciate just how important electricity is. We really do live in an electric universe.
No evidence has been presented in the video to suggest this. Sure, electricity exists, and it is utilised by organisms, but that's far from making the Earth electrically connected with the Sun, the rest of the galaxy, and even the entire universe. I mean, for a start, the solar wind prevents charged particles entering the solar system, so how we can be connected to the galaxy is a complete mystery, let alone the rest of the universe, given the huge volume of pretty much empty intergalactic space. From JC. The last part of the video seems to be dedicated to showing pictures of very different things that nevertheless look similar. There are lots of examples of this, comparing the filamentary structure of galactic clusters to the dendritic connections between neurons to the structure of the foam on a head of beer. There are mathematical similarities between the physics underlying all these cases, but it's foolish to insist that therefore the physics must be identical.